Federal judge in the District of Columbia, Judge Ali Khan, has found that the Trump administration is, with false pretense, trying to manipulate the litigation process in their fake, false attempt to rescind the federal funding freeze that they never really rescinded at all. And the judge said, based on that, and other things like the violation of the First Amendment, the violation of the appropriations provision of the Constitution, the violation of the Administrative Procedures Act, the acts of the Office of Management and Budget under Donald Trump to try to freeze not-for-profits out, stop their funding, stop their grants, and stop the programs that they help and the people that they help, at least for now, is over, with a temporary restraining order now entered. I'm going to tell you about it. I'm going to tell you how this is the blueprint. This particular case is the blueprint with the First Amendment, the Administrative Procedures Act, and with the Constitution appropriations provision that's going to be used time and time again in all the loose lawsuits filed daily against the Trump administration and why they're successful. We now have the third temporary restraining order against the Trump administration, 2 on funding, 1 on birthright citizenship. I'm going to break it all down for you. You know where. Legal AF, the YouTube channel. Take a minute. You see the symbol? Take a minute. Hit the blue subscribe button. Ali Khan, Judge Ali Khan, had a hearing last week. At the same time, there was a hearing in Rhode Island. I want to straighten up some of the facts here so people can follow. Before I get to the point where Ali Khan called the Trump administration a liar and called Carolyn Leavitt, the press secretary, the youngest press secretary in history, a liar, and quoted her and cited her. Before I get there, though, let me just give you the lay of the land. Two separate cases filed. This is how it's going to work against the Trump administration. Again, I want to use this hot take as a teachable moment for strategy and tactics. This is how it's going to work. This is how I told you it was going to work. Not for profits on one side, and affected organizations on one side against the Trump administration, and side by side with attorneys general from 18 to 22 different states that are all Democratic. They are going to link together separately and together, filing in multiple jurisdictions on the same issues to try to get the same result, which is to stop the Trump administration in its tracks. We are just 2 weeks in. We've got 3 temporary restraining orders and almost a case a day against the Trump administration. How's that going for you so far, Trump? You bring chaos, we bring federal lawsuits and get TROs. And we'll meet you on the battlefield. So at the exact same time, just to catch everybody up, Donald Trump issues a series of executive orders, mainly going after woke ideology, and then ends it with ordering the Office of Management and Budget to stop all funding to all not-for-profits, to all states. Just pull the U.S. out of the U.S. economy. Just stop. And I can't even tell you. We're talking hundreds of billions, almost $1 trillion worth of grants going to organizations that everybody on this podcast, everybody on this hot take will agree is a good thing for America to be involved with, and that the private sector is not going to do. You know, healthcare for children, poverty alleviation for children, famine alleviation for children and senior citizens. Yeah. Organizations dedicated to reducing school violence. There are hundreds of thousands of organizations that do God's work every day, just helping fellow Americans, but they need federal funding because they're not for profits and they rely on grants and they rely on other funding. Because who's going to invest money in them? It's only donations or the federal government who steps in, giving them paychecks because they're workers, right? They don't work for free. They don't live in free housing. They are consumers as well. So it helps the economy, helps people, helps the economy. What could go wrong? So when Donald Trump decided his second or third day of his administration to do a funding freeze, the attorneys general sprung into action along with not-for-profit groups that received the recipients of this money. First group gets into court first. 22 attorneys general file in Rhode Island. They pulled Judge McConnell. McConnell issues a temporary restraining order on a similar grounds as Judge Ali Khan just did in D.C., and also takes the administration to task through Carolyn Leavitt, the press secretary, that says, when you tried to unfreeze it because we were already in a lawsuit, you were just trying to do an end run around jurisdiction here. And I don't believe your attempts to unfreeze the freeze or to allow the federal funding to go forward. So I'm issuing the temporary restraining order because I find it's more likely than not that those states are going to prevail for a violation of the Constitution, because it's the Congress that has the purse strings, not the executive branch. Congress already allocated this money, and the executive branch can't say no, can't say block. And so Judge McConnell issued his. Now we fast forward to Judge Ali Khan. Ali Khan, in her courtroom, she issued an immediate restraining order, but said, I'm going to have a hearing on February the 3rd. That was the result, this new order on temporary restraining order. In order to get a temporary in that case, just to be clear, it was brought by the National Council of Not-for-Profits and a whole series of not-for-profits that all filed affidavits and evidence saying how they'll be devastated that once the spigot of money was turned off, even if they turn it back on quickly, even a temporary cessation of funding can destroy their mission, destroy their employees, destroy the people that depend on them who are impoverished, who are disadvantaged, or underprivileged in society. That's who they're working with. Right? They're not helping the rich. They're not tutoring rich kids to get into Ivy League schools. They're helping the downtrodden, the poor, the disadvantaged, the underprivileged. That which private sector would completely ignore. Right? Is Facebook taking any of its money and paying for soup kitchens? No. Is Bezos? He's more worried about how big his yacht is or how hot his girlfriend is, not paying for libraries, soup kitchens, alleviating poverty and illiteracy. Okay, so who has to step in? Federal government always has and always should. So the not-for-profits run it at the same time. They get Judge Ali Khan, a Biden appointee, vast experience. I love Judge Ali Khan. She not only clerked federally, went to Georgetown Law School, she was already an appellate judge. She was a judge on the appellate court for the District of Columbia, not the federal, but the District of Columbia has its own court system, and she was an appellate judge there. She was also the Solicitor General, arguing before the appellate court before she got elevated to the appellate court. Then Biden put her on the federal district court at a trial court level, and that's how we got this 30-page decision. Now let's talk about the lying. When you get a temporary restraining order, you have to prove 4 things to the judge. 4 things. That you have a likelihood of success on the merits, meaning at the end of the case, a year from now or 2 years from now, whatever it takes, you're going to win. She's going to look under the hood and see you're going to win based on the evidence that you have so far at this preliminary stage and what you've argued. That's one. And she found that these not-for-profits have proved that they're going to win under 3 grounds. Administrative Procedures Act, because the Office of Management and Budget, in doing the freeze, did so in an arbitrary and capricious fashion. That's a term of art, in violation of the administrative law that they need to follow. She also found that it was more likely than not that the not-for-profits proved that they were being targeted for their First Amendment expression, because Donald Trump said out loud in the executive orders that he was trying to go after and root out woke ideology. I don't know what's woke about feeding a child, but let's leave that for another hot take. So First Amendment violation. And third, that Donald Trump and the executive branch have violated the Appropriations Clause of the Constitution, which puts the power of the purse strings solely in the hands of Congress. Only Congress can allocate funds. Only Congress can have spending bills. And once they spend, the other branch can't stop it, because that's a violation of separation of powers and the Appropriations Clause. Right? So you have those 3. Judge Khan said, yeah, you're going to win on all 3. Then you have to go to what's called an inadequate remedy at law. In other words, money damage down the road, you get a check, a month from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, you could be out of business by then. So irreparable harm or inadequate remedy of law sort of go together. You're being irreparably harmed and it can't be compensated with money. She found for them on both of those. And then lastly, of course, the public interest and public equities tip in favor of stopping the cutoff of the funding because of the harm that it's going to do. But here's the line where she accused the Trump administration of lying. It's on page 14. Let's turn there now. Feel like I'm in law school class. On page 14, the government, the Trump administration, ran in and argued, Judge, you don't have to make a temporary restraining order. We've stopped the bad conduct that you thought we were here on. You know, that freeze that we did. Yeah, we got rid of the freeze because the Office of Management and Budget had a one-liner that said, you know, that freeze, we've rescinded it. And the judge says, yeah, except Carolyn Levitt, the press secretary, and this has been cited now by 2 different federal judges, this particular thing, said, and it's up, we'll put it up here. We'll put it up on the board, as they say. Carolyn Levitt, on page 4, a reprint in the order from a cut and paste from Carolyn Levitt's X, or former Twitter account. She said, right after the Office of Management and Budget allegedly rescinded the funding freeze, she said, this is not a rescission of the federal funding freeze. Thanks, Caroline. It is simply a rescission of the OMB memo. Oh, thanks for the clarity. So you didn't really rescind the federal funding freeze. Why? Why did we do it? She says, to end any confusion created by the court's injunction. And the president's executive order on federal funding remains in full force and effect and will be rigorously implemented. The judge said, great. Right after we were in court, you issue a tweet, effectively, that completely undermines your argument in front of me that you are, that I don't have jurisdiction because you've stopped doing the bad thing. You say you're continuing to do the bad thing, and you say it out loud. Or as Judge McConnell said in the Rhode Island's exact same case, I can't cross-examine a tweet. However, I can read. Now, here's what she said about that, calling the Trump administration a liar. Bottom of 14. The voluntary cessation doctrine, which covers when somebody stops doing the bad thing on their own, is especially important in cases where the defendant is suspected of manipulating the judicial process through the false pretenses of single-handedly ending a dispute. What the judge goes on to say on page 15 is that they are deliberately acting in order to avoid litigation and avoid the court's jurisdiction. And she's not buying it. Caroline Levitt, the youngest press secretary in the history of America. How you doing so far? Yeah? So what does it mean? What does all this mean? Let me read to you from the injunction. Now, this runs parallel to Judge McConnell's injunction up in Rhode Island. So there's 2 injunctions on the same thing. And that's how it works sometimes. Federal judges work independently in different districts in the same courthouse. You can get 2 injunctions from 2 different judges from 2 different groups of plaintiffs addressing the exact same thing. If they conflict, the judges sort of work it out. But right now, you've got consistent temporary restraining orders against the same federal funding freeze in case there was any doubt by the Trump administration. And she's not allowing any doubt. She's making the Trump administration tell each and every the Office of Management and Budget, and every agency in the government, and that's hundreds and hundreds of agencies, to get a copy of this order, tell them what the order means, and then report back to her on the 7th of February with a joint status report of compliance showing that they've complied with it. Here's what the order actually says, just so you see how federal orders and all orders work. Ordered, that is on page 29, that defendants, that's the Trump administration, are enjoined from implementing, giving effect to, or reinstating under a different name the directives in OMB Memorandum M2513, that's the freeze, with respect to the disbursement of federal funds under all open awards. Open awards means Congress has funded it. You, executive branch, can't unfund it. Ordered that defendants must provide written notice of the court's temporary restraining order, that's this 30 pages, to all agencies in which OMB Memorandum M2513 was addressed. That's basically all agencies. The written notice shall instruct these agencies that they shall not take any steps to implement, give effect to, or reinstate under a different name the directives in OMB Memorandum M2513 and respect to the disbursement of all funds. They shall instruct the agencies to release any disbursements. Next page, 30. The defendant shall file a status report on Feb 7, apprising the court of the status of its compliance, including providing a copy of the notice that was used. And then the parties, both sides, shall meet and confirm it and get together and talk through things to file a joint status report proposing a preliminary injunction briefing schedule for the future, right? Temporary restraining order is your first step. Well, your first step is sort of an administrative restraining order. You get one quick from the judge, maybe just off a short hearing. Then she goes to full temporary restraining order briefing. Usually it's done with notice to the other side. Sometimes it's done what's called ex parte. Temporary restraining order is what it sounds like. It temporarily holds the status quo, makes certain orders in order to preserve and avoid the prejudice to the plaintiffs because their likelihood of success on the merits. That stays in place for a short amount of time, usually 10 days, 20 days, 30 days max, usually until you get to a preliminary injunction, which stays in place until the end of the case. So she's saying, give me the briefing schedule that you propose. It better be short, by the way. And then I'll have another hearing on preliminary injunction. One more time, I'll hear these issues. Now, let me tell you in advance, I've done this for 35 years. When I've gotten the temporary restraining order, I've always gotten the preliminary injunction because it's like the same facts, the same analysis. The case doesn't get better for the Trump administration. Their arguments don't get better. The evidence doesn't get any better. It gets worse. They'll have more evidence against them. Judge will hear it, and then she'll enter the temporary restraining order against the Trump administration. He can then take that up on appeal. Yeah, he can take that up on appeal. It'll be to the D.C. Court of Appeals, which is a moderate, liberal-leaning court. That's the other part of the strategy. File in New England to get the first or the second circuits, which are liberal. File in the Pacific Northwest to get the Ninth Circuit, which is liberal. File in D.C. against these agencies, which is a liberal moderate circuit, to get those. So go for the first, the second, the ninth, maybe the third, which covers New Jersey and that kind of thing. Stay away from, the Fifth Circuit, the Sixth Circuit, the Seventh Circuit, and things like that. Those are the bad circuits. These are the good circuits, right? So that's what's happening here. And just to show you that there are two temporary restraining orders, almost about the same thing, when Judge Ali Khan talks about on page 5 and 6, the related Rhode Island case. Again, they don't defer to other federal judges. They just acknowledge them. She said that following the hearing, that the judge there, Judge McConnell, issued a restraining order of his own, a temporary restraining order, prohibiting the defendants, which consisted of Trump, the Office of Management and Budget, and 11 federal agencies from pausing, freezing, impeding, blocking, canceling, or terminating their compliance with awards and obligations to provide federal finance assistance to plaintiff states. So that was really aimed at the states. She's really aiming her temporary restraining order at grants to not-for-profits. You put it all together, you've now taken out the heart of the federal funding freeze and put it in front of the federal courts. What I'm hoping from this coverage here on Legal AF, on this channel, is that you're starting to, I'm hoping to rebuild some confidence in that the Democrats know what they're doing in courts and progressives know what we're doing in courts, that we know which courts to go for, we know which judges to go for. And yes, it'll all end up before the United States Supreme Court. Everything I'm talking about on this hot take right now will end up in the next 30 to 90 days in front of the United States Supreme Court before they go home and stop hearing arguments in April or May. And we'll cover it here again and follow up. That's one thing you can count on here in Legal AF. We will follow up and drill down on all of these issues right here. Take a minute, hit the free subscribe button. That's how you can contribute to what we're building here on the channel. It's free. It's simple. Flick the subscribe button. Help us get to 500,000. It's not ego. It's that the bigger we are, the more your voice is heard. So until my next reporting, either on Legal AF, the podcast, or the Midas Touch Network, on Wednesdays and Saturdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, Popok Live on Tuesdays, on Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. I don't pull any punches. I answer questions, and it's Popok Live, and then here on Legal AF. Until my next report, this is Michael Popok. In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories, the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.